Hey everybody, this is Alchemist, and you'll have to pardon the fan in the background. It's quite warm here, and this is I've actually tried multiple times at recording this. Initially, I wanted to talk about Picard, uh, and essentially every time I try to discuss this show, it ends up with me essentially screaming into the abyss. Suffice it to say, I'm gonna try and keep things as I'm trying not gonna try not to go on a tangent here because that way lies madness, and I'll have to try this again. But suffice it to say that while the first episode seemed promising to everyone, it was more or less just a bait and switch. This show is the most boring, meandering, downright insulting, like intellectually offensive show that I have ever watched. And I've sat through some seasons of The Flash. Like, this isn't even just like bad in terms of canon. This is bad in terms of I am dumber for having watched it. It is a dumb, meandering, plotting, nonsensical mess of a show filled with unlikable characters. Friggin' Batwoman is written better than this show. Batwoman. I can't believe what I'm saying either. But Batwoman is a better show than Picard, and that is an impressive feat. Picard shares this trait with Discovery and Strange New Worlds, most likely, which I have absolutely no faith in. People keep reciting the first season curse with like Star Trek. It's like the first season is always the weakest. You got to give them time. It's the same team of people. It's the same writers' room. It's the same creators working on it. They have had 6 seasons of live action Star Trek now to get this down, to understand what the hell they're doing. They've had their chance. What you see is what you get. Also, I love that tacit admission from a lot of people who defended the early seasons of Discovery that, oh yeah, it's bad, sure, but you gotta give it a while. It'll improve. Okay, so you're admitting it's terrible. You just admitted that it's awful then. Season 1 of Next Generation had some low lows, man, but it never dipped this far. I mean, there was the occasional piece of shit episode. Code of Honor is the reigning champion. But oh my god, like I would rather watch Next Generation season 1. In fact, as soon as I'm done recording this, I probably will. Just to cleanse the palate, just to see a version of Jean-Luc Picard that isn't this. This is not Picard. This is Patrick Stewart playing somebody playing Picard. This is Patrick Stewart playing a rusty version of Picard that he left on the shelf because he wanted to leave the character behind after Next Gen, let alone after 4 movies. Like, he was so burned out at the end of Next Generation. Which is why Picard is Rambo in those movies. It's to keep Patrick Stewart coming back, essentially. He was so burned out that he wanted to take creative control of the franchise. Which, thank goodness he didn't. Because a lot of the problems with Picard are because of Patrick Stewart. Not all of them. Oh, Kurtzman, Shaban, Goldsman and Paradise, most of the blame is on them. But Patrick Stewart should never be given creative control of anything. A lot of the problems, the reasons why Insurrection and Nemesis have the problems they do, is because of, well, in the first case of Insurrection, it's because of a flawed premise from Michael Piller. But also, it's largely because of the creative input, and I'm saying that with sarcasm quotes, from Stewart and Brent Spiner, who are also prominent in both seasons of Picard, mind you. Spiner has basically played 4 characters so far in Picard. Yeah. So, it's not good. It's, in fact, quite terrible. Impressively so. If you were trying to make a bad Star Trek show, I don't think you could have succeeded to this degree. Success, in this case, is measured by how terrible and unbearable and soul-destroying the show is. And, again, I could go into it. I could start talking about it. And I'm not even going to go into... Like, every time... This annoys me to no end. Every time you talk about, like, how bad these shows are, people always have to quantify it. Because if you don't quantify it exactly, people will start accusing you of all kinds of ridiculous things. And it's to the point where a lot of well-known Star Trek YouTubers... If you watch Star Trek YouTube, if you watch these people on YouTube, you know who they are. They know who they are. Refuse to discuss it. Just flat out. They are refusing to touch. Like, they've seen the shows, and they're refusing to touch it. The problems I have with these shows actually begin in a very unexpected place for the people who would accuse me of being all kinds of things. It actually begins with sound design. It begins with the sound design watching the very first episode of Discovery. And then we sort of move on to, like, music and costuming and camera work and then set design. And then we get to special effects and writing. These shows are categorically flawed. And again, like I said earlier, if I go down that road and start talking about it, this is just going to dissolve into me screaming into the abyss again. So, let's not go there this time. Let's try to have a more coherent video here. But it did get me thinking after my last attempt, and I had the chance to cool down and palate cleanse. And I did that by writing and working on assets. So I've talked about this a few times. I've mentioned it in passing. But I'm running I run a Star Trek Adventures game for some friends every week. Most of the time. We do skip a few weeks. That's sort of a tale as old as tabletop RPGs, is struggling to keep a consistent schedule. But we generally try to run it once a week. And something that I've always loved is the process of creating something. Whether that is working on a model for a game or texturing something. In the case of generating assets for this game, all of my previous hobbies have come in handy. I used to do lots of game sprites when I was in college. I dabbled in 3D modeling, which I've dived into Blender to overcome my mortal terror of Blender in order to generate assets for this game, for like visual stuff. I've learned because one of the fun things that a lot of people do is the celebrity photo edit. uh, for Star Trek characters in a forum RPG, or more often now in this game in Star Trek Adventures. And so something fun that I've taken up doing is photo edits to create character tokens. And some of them are celebrities, others are video game characters whose appearances are reasonably photorealistic enough that they work with the screenshots of the uniforms that I'm using in the edits. Although one of my characters took a picture in like Second Life, and like, okay, sure. But like the process of writing, I habitually, whenever I make a character that I take seriously, a character that I intend to take really seriously, and invest a lot of time into in a game, like Star Trek Online, for example, I write a lot of backstory for them. I come up with all kinds of stuff. Like every single character, like you've seen a number of characters over the course of Rise of the Red Shirt. The player character Lima, Richard, Pran, 8 of 8, who's now known as Karen Kane, because fuck you, CW. I used to be a fan of Batwoman. Before the CW utterly tarnished the character. All of those characters have a reason to be where they are, and a reason to be, and things that happen to them, and stuff going on. Basically, what I would do is, I would, like, in my mind's eye, it's been 10 years of Star Trek Online. Like, of the Star Trek Online era has been going for 10 years. Even in game time, it's been like 3 years. We're in 2411 now. The game started in 2409. But in my mind's eye, it's like 2420 something. And so, like, in my headcanon, and so, like, all these characters have fundamentally changed from who they started as. And like, every year, I kind of, like, jot down notes, and like, at some point every year, I sort of, like, sit down and bullet point. All right, here's what happens, and I lay it out like it were a television show. I like come up with like 20 or so odd scenarios that happen to these characters, and I bullet point like the stuff that happens in each, and like what revelations are made, how different characters react to those things. So I'm fairly OCD and insane when it comes to things like character. This is just me. This is just how my damaged brain works. This is what I do for fun. And it kind of goes back to, I was watching a documentary on the making of Half-Life 2, and they had, I think it was Mark Laidlaw? It might have been Gabe New or Mark Laidlaw, but I think it was Laidlaw, who was talking about how he creates characters, or how they created the characters in Half-Life, and how when they created these characters, and they were coming up with how they should look, and how they should act, and how they should speak, they basically sat down with a piece of paper, and came up with like a long litany of questions that they were asking themselves about who this character is, and those things included favorite things, birthday, blood type, pet peeves. He may have mentioned favorite sexual positions in there somewhere, like sexual fetishes or dysfunctions thereof. It was an exhaustive list, and by the time they were done, or so Mark Laidlaw has said, they knew this character enough that they knew what they should look like, how they should act, how they should speak. They had a voice for that character. And my mind immediately sort of like jumped to like Metal Gear Solid when he mentioned sexual dysfunction, because Ocelot sure does love that handgun. Yeah, but I also when I was watching that, I was in college at the time, and I was that's a great idea. That's a cool idea. I should do that. And I and I started doing that when I was playing Starfleet Command. I came up with like an RP character for Starfleet Command, and like I came up with like, here's him and his ship, and here's his crew, and here's who they are, and here's who each of them are, and here are their reasons for being where they are, and here are the ways they interact with one another. So Star Trek Online is not the first time that I've done this for a group of characters. And in fact, my characters in Star Trek Online are attached to those characters that I made for basically just for fun for Starfleet Command, just for the sheer fun of creativity. Like their story is sort of a sequel to that story, and working on Star Trek Adventures has given me the opportunity to sort of bring all this stuff that I do just for fun into focus on one activity. I've had to I've had to do writing, model work, texturing. I've had to do photo editing, just all kinds of stuff. And it's made me actually take up new things, like learn how to do like new things as well. It's pushed me to improve and to experience new things. Why am I talking about? So why have I gone on to this? When I was a little kid, I had the fortune to grow up watching Star Trek The Next Generation. And there's an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Deja Q, I want to say, where Q, having utterly failed and to tempt a human to join the Continuum and being generally a nuisance to the Q, as much a nuisance to the Q Continuum as he is to us, as he is to our focus characters on the Enterprise, is basically given an ultimatum by the Q. That's it. You're out. You're out. You're out. Get out. And they drum him out of the Continuum, and he has a fraction of a second to mull what he wants to be and where he wants to go. And he says, human, and take me to the Enterprise. And so you have the plot of the episode. You have the B plot, essentially. The A plot, well, they both kind of feel like a B plot, but they're both interesting enough. It's not the best episode of Next Generation, but it is a good episode of Next Generation. The big thread of the week plot, or I suppose the Q plot gives us the thread of the week, but the overarching plot, what the Enterprise is busy doing when Q shows up is there's an asteroid falling out of orbit, and they're trying to figure out a way to stop it. And so Picard asks Geordi, he's looking for options, and he knows it's a stupid question when he asks it, but he needs to explore all the options that they have. So he asks Geordi, can we just push this thing? This asteroid, by the way, is like the size of Mount Everest. It's huge. Okay, this is what they would refer to as a global killer if it hits this planet. And Geordi basically says that it would take such and such kph of delta V for them to begin pushing the asteroid. And he compares it to an ant pushing a tricycle. When I first saw that episode, I didn't understand what he was talking about. It's basically, well, I understood what he mentioned, like the ant and the tricycle thing, because of course you know how big an ant is and how big a tricycle is, and that would be fucking impossible, basically. But I didn't understand that when he was like giving like we need such and such a delta V, etc. He was actually, that's not technobabble. That's not magic that he's talking about. Like, he's actually talking about actual measurements and scientific measurements of acceleration and angular momentum when he's giving that description. And I didn't understand it then, but I wanted to. And I started checking out library books. In fact, the very first library book I ever checked out was a volume of Isaac Asimov's Library of the Universe. It's a sort of a series of books for kids to get them started on things like astronomy in a really digestible sort of format for someone so young. And it ignited kind of a hunger in me to know more. I wanted to learn. It inspired me to learn. And so later on, I'm older, and I watched that episode, and Geordi describes that they need such and such delta V, kph of delta V to begin pushing the asteroid. That begin is very important. I'll explain why in a second. And I knew what he was talking about. It was no longer, it was not some magic incantation. It wasn't technobabble. It wasn't multimodal reflection sorting. I knew what he was talking about. I knew that he was talking about how the asteroid had its own momentum and the Enterprise would need to counter that momentum first to apply an equal force before it could begin pushing it back into a stable orbit, and then it would need to accelerate the rock into a velocity to have enough velocity to maintain the stable orbit. Like, I understood when I saw this episode again, I understood the mechanics of what Geordi was talking about this time. And furthermore, later on in the episode, Q comes up with an idea, because they're trying to get some use out of him, because he's just moping around the ship, to, like, change the inertial density of the asteroid. And at first, Geordi's like, and how am I supposed to do that? But then he figures out that the Enterprise can use its warp field to make the asteroid lighter so they can push it. And by the way, this basically works on the same principle as a Mass Effect field. So they beat Mass Effect to it, essentially. But the problem is, the warp bubble won't extend around the entire asteroid. Remember, it's the size of a mountain. It's the size of Mount Everest, essentially. It'll only go, like, through it. So instead of having one asteroid with one inertial mass, you essentially created one asteroid with two inertial masses, because you've reduced the inertia of the center so much that you've essentially given it two separate centers of gravity that are going to want to go wherever they want. They describe this really fast, but I immediately knew what they were talking about. And I knew that because I had bothered to learn. Star Trek The Next Generation inspired me to improve myself. Running this game for Star Trek Adventures has likewise inspired me to improve myself and learn new things. Who is going to be inspired to learn anything from Picard and Discovery and Strange New Worlds when all they can give you... I've actually, like, in the process of writing for Star Trek Adventures, I've actually, like, done deep dives into quantum mechanics for a lot of the story that I'm telling. I'm basically homebrewing the whole thing. Like, I've tried dabbling in pre-written modules, but that's not really my strength, it seems. So I'm basically writing it myself, like everything myself. Like, it's all homebrewed, which has robbed me of a significant amount of sleep. But who is going to be inspired to learn from these shows when everything is a magic incantation? This was a problem that really began with Voyager. And the defenders of these shows will say, well, Next Generation had technobabble. True. But everything in the episode, the cause of and solution didn't always revolve around technobabble. I just described that situation to you, where that wasn't the case. So I was shown something real, something concrete, something you can learn and understand and explain to somebody else, and they could learn and understand. and it inspired me to want to know about it. If I were growing up now and I was watching this episode with like the fucking mushroom drive, and it inspired me to want to learn about it, and I realized it was nothing but made up gobbledygook, insert anything from these shows here. It doesn't have to be the mushroom drive. That's just the most preposterous thing these shows came up with that comes to mind. I would feel cheated. I would feel so ripped off and let down. I would be really discouraged. And I feel like as bad as these episodes are, and they are bad, they are god-awful, these shows suck. As bad as they are, the worst part about them isn't the writing, it isn't the sound design, it isn't the music or the camera work, it isn't the costuming or the set design, it isn't the even the ridiculously overabundant and over the top special effects. The worst thing about these shows is how uninspirational they are. Shows like Batman the Animated Series and Star Trek The Next Generation, this is family television. Batman is specifically for kids. But they don't talk down but Batman does not talk down to the kids. Star Trek does not talk, like Star Trek The Next Generation did not talk down to you. And there was an effort, not always a successful effort, to ground the show. And not to make the cause of and solution to every situation in the show rely on magical bullshit. There's a scene in the second season which Red Letter Media parodied to all hell, where a bunch of characters of Discovery are standing around a desk, and it's the most insane, ridiculous gibberish that they're spouting out. They're spouting out science words, but it's like someone trying to speak a foreign language with no context of what these words mean. And at the end of this conversation, they just sort of pat themselves on the back and go, "Science, hell yeah!" And I'm just sitting there with my face buried in my hands. Because I know these things, that I know what the things are that they're talking about, and this is utter insanity that I'm hearing. Creating Star Trek is giving a tabletop game. Star Trek Adventures is giving me the kind of inspiration and experience that Next Generation gave me when I was a little kid. I feel like at this point, I can honestly say that I'm putting more thought into my work than they are, which is sad. That's an incredibly depressing realization to have when I am, at best, a hobbyist. I don't get paid for running a Star Trek game every week, but these people get paid for putting out garbage on streaming every week. I have no hope for Strange New Worlds. I have even less hope for Season 3 of Picard. Before this season is even done, they have already they've already set up they have already set up season 3. They've announced all the TNG cast are coming back for season 3, which is what they should have done in season 1, but again, Patrick Stewart had his say, and next to nobody came back. Jonathan Frakes came back because he was directing the episode, essentially. But other than that, so yeah, that's something that should have been from the beginning. That Patrick Stewart, because he had creative control, damaged and destroyed, essentially. Like, the entire possibility that could have happened. And now we have Picard and his Romulan waifu Laris. How's that going to go with Beverly Crusher? You know, Picard's love interest? Forever? The two admitted they were deep. They were like head over heels for each other. I guess that just went nowhere. You're seriously just gonna give us nothing after all that. Picard's into his Romulan waifu now. Okay, sure, whatever. That's already a sour note. Maybe the one good thing that could possibly come out of it is we get to see Worf in command of the Enterprise. But I'm afraid of what Worf is going to look like. If he's going to look like the god-awful Klingons from Discovery. Probably. They're probably going to do that. They showed a Klingon skull, and it was General Martok's skull. And it was the Discovery Klingon. So they're probably going to completely destroy Worf as well. Won't that be fun to see? I have no hopes for this. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't inspire me. Star Trek Adventures is basically Star Trek for me now. With Star Trek Online maybe coming at a close second, depending on my mood and if Cryptic has done something stupid in the last 24 hours, which is, really, that's a coin toss. And I feel like that's basically all that I had to say. This time in a much more concise manner. That wasn't me just screaming into the abyss. Just despair, utterly despairing. Yeah. I think that about covers it. So, channel news before I go. Working on recording more Elite Force 2. The changeover to the computer has had some glitches that I've had to work out, which is why things have been a little bit slow. But this computer runs a hell of a lot better than my last one. Many thanks to Andrew and Lord Ice for helping me out with this new PC. Thank you guys both. This was crazy generous, and you've been crazy generous helping me with this thing, and I literally could not have built this thing without you guys. This thing is a beast. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you both. And I will try to deliver the kind of content that I hope justifies your faith in me and the sheer amount of pain and suffering you guys went through to help me get this thing, to help me put this thing together. This also means that I am probably also going to be able to do a run of a Legendary Edition, Mass Effect. I was running on Windows 7. This one goes out to Jones. I was running on Windows 7, so I couldn't actually run it then. But I have wanted to dip my toes into Mass Effect for a long time because I enjoy suffering. God damn it. I enjoy tormenting myself with what could have been. I will probably mod the third game because fuck that ending. But yeah. Yeah. I think that about covers it. I'm looking forward to Star Trek Resurgence. I'm hoping please be good. Resurgence, please be good. I want you to succeed, Resurgence. Please don't disappoint me. I would like to see Star Trek Resurgence essentially be like a version of, if it's at all, if it turns out to be like the Spectrum Holobyte games, like a Final Unity or Judgment Rights, yeah, fuck yeah. I'm all in. All in on it. Shut up and take my money. But we'll see. We'll see. This is the first game these people are putting together. This is a lot of former Traveler's Tales people, but Traveler's Tales got a kind of a checkered reputation towards the end, so we'll see how well it turns out. I'm really hoping for it. I'm really hoping this turns out well. I think that about covers it. So I'm probably gonna go and record some gameplay footage to put behind this, so you have something interesting to look at, and you're not just having to listen to the dulcet tones of my voice for like 40 fucking minutes now. Jesus. And I'll see you guys next week. Later.